Welcome to Sorghum Smart Talk Policy Edition, sponsored by Richardson Seeds, a global leader in sorghum research, production, and packaging. They're headquartered in Vega, Texas, and send products around the nation. Learn more at richardsonseeds.com or click the link in our show notes. In today's episode, we are joined by National Sorghum Producers CEO Tim Lust and Kansas Big First Representative Tracey Mann in the first episode of our Meet Your Sorghum Belt Representative series.
This is Tim Lust, CEO of National Sorghum Producers, and I'm honored today to be with Congressman Tracey Mann as he joins us this morning for the podcast. Tracey, of course, served as the 50th Lieutenant Governor of Kansas from 2018 to 2019, and then was sworn in as Congress in 2021. But certainly, I just want to start from a background, no fifth generation Kansan and born and raised on a farm that your family, I believe your great grandfather may be born in the same house as you were. And so certainly someone that has deep agriculture roots and understands the realities of agriculture, and then great business background as well in leading into this. So just wanted to welcome you to the podcast this morning first, and then we'll jump into some items.
Yeah, well, Tim, great to join. Great getting to know you. Thanks for all that you are doing for agriculture and specifically for the sorghum industry, and just pleasure to get to be here. Like you said, I grew up on a family farming operation in Northwest Kansas. I was the fifth generation to live in my house. And like a lot of listeners, these are generational family farms, not all of them, but a lot of them, these are family businesses. A lot of nuances with that, and we got to make sure that we have the right policies in place to make sure that all of our generational family farms can continue to operate successfully here moving forward.
So let's talk about that. Obviously, no stranger to sorghum, had it as part of family operation, and certainly cattle side and other agriculture interests as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So, we had a farm and a little preconditioning feed yard. And I spent thousands of hours driving a tractor and combine. Growing up, it was wheat, a little bit of sorghum. And then as the freedom to farm happened and as agriculture changed, we went more to a no-till model and practices. And now our farm's a lot of sorghum and a lot of corn and a little bit of wheat right now. So definitely seen some changes there. My dad and brother operate our family's farm, and then I've done other things in my career. I'm kind of the first guy since our family immigrated to the country that's not in production agriculture every day, which is kind of strange, but I try to help the industry and advocate for it every chance I get.
Well, that kind of leads directly into the next question of what drew you to politics.
Yeah, good question. I've always cared a lot about the country, and just had a deep sense and gratitude, frankly, that we all get to live in the greatest country in the history of the world. I went to K-State, studied agricultural economics, ran for and was fortunate to get elected to be student body president. So kind of got involved. Politics a little different, but from that regard in college. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. my first summer off the farm while I was in college, and I served as then Congressman Jerry Moran's first ever intern. So I worked for him for a summer, and he instilled in me a love for Kansas and Kansans that's never left me. So came back, finished up at K-State. I always planned to move back to our family farm, but my older brother beat me back, and there really wasn't room on the farm for everybody. Plus, I have really bad asthma and allergies, and so I decided to go in the commercial real estate business. Kind of wrote off politics, and I got appointed lieutenant governor a few years ago and served in that role, and then ran for Congress here in 2020 and got sworn in here a little over a year ago.
Certainly, there's just an incredible legacy with the Big First, and certainly you mentioned Jerry Moran and obviously Pat Roberts before that, and just a tremendous number of Kansans that have had a tremendous impact on the country, originating in the Big First, and so certainly a congressional district with a rich history as well. But as you look at that, agriculture, obviously you're on the Sorghum podcast, so we care a lot about sorghum and talking about how you represent our members, but also really farmers of the Big First in agriculture. What is it like representing the Big First?
Well, it's like winning the lottery, Tim. I mean, it's just first off, we call it the Big First District. For those that don't know, it's basically the western 2/3 of Kansas, except for the Wichita area, is generally speaking what the district is. And of 435 congressional districts, we are the number one. We're the number 3 ag producing district in the country on dollars. So only 3 districts do more than $10 billion a year of ag production. Last year, we did about $12.5 billion. And out of 435 districts, Tim, our district, my district is the number 1 district in the whole country for sorghum production. We were also number 1 for beef production, and we're number 1 out of 435 for wheat production. So, it's a big ag district. A lot of people have represented it well over the years, just trying to, to fill some pretty big shoes and do right by our ag producers and the ag industry in the district.
Well, certainly you're off to a great start from our opinion, and we certainly appreciate your leadership and working through and just appreciate your background and certainly understanding of agriculture from all sides and all aspects. And, I think that will be really important as we jump into some of the policy areas that we see coming. And so we might just jump to that. Talk to me a little bit about, what are some of the current policy areas that you certainly see, either agriculture. Obviously, we'll get to a farm bill discussion here in a bit, but maybe before we get to the farm bill, what are some of the other areas that you see that maybe from a positive or from a huge concern right now from a policy standpoint?
Yeah, those are the great questions. There's a lot of, so I'm on the House Ag Committee, a really important committee for agriculture, but there's a lot of things happening in other committees and other areas, Washington, D.C., that absolutely affect agriculture, like the stepped up basis, Tim, which is in the Ways and Means Committee, it's tax policy, but we saw efforts in the president's budget last year to do away with the stepped up basis. We and others fought tooth and nail to keep it. I remember we were meeting virtually, our House Ag Committee was, and I offered an amendment to a bill via Zoom. I actually went and stood in the middle of a sorghum field and offered an amendment to get a sense of the Ag Committee of a willingness to keep the stepped up basis. I was actually very surprised and very disappointed that amendment actually failed due to some politics. It later we were able to preserve the stepped up basis, but that's a big deal. And then another thing that's come up here, Tim, I don't know if you follow this, is this effort we call it the farm killer tax, but it would be a one-time capital gains hit on unrealized gains for businesses or property that's been owned for 90 years. And that is buried in the president's budget that he just released last month. And, you think about this, all of our generational family farms could be disastrous. So we're fighting tooth and nail to stop that and a whole bunch of other bad things on the regulatory front as well.
No, I think there's certainly, as you read the details of some of these policy items, there's certainly things to be concerned about, and certainly those general business items related to taxes and regulatory are some critical ones in terms of things that are important to all of our listeners and our members, I believe. One of the things I wanted to jump to here is towards the end as we wrap up is we got a farm bill coming. Obviously, from a timeline, pretty close, but from a process, maybe not as close. What's your thoughts on the farm bill and where we're headed?
Yeah, well, to remind everybody, the current farm bill expires September 30 of 2023. So we are now almost exactly 17 months away. And frankly, I've been frustrated and pretty vocal about the fact that I feel like the House Ag Committee is behind in gearing up for this next farm bill. Before we did the last one, I was not in Congress at the time, but there were 120 to 130 hearings, listening sessions, both in D.C., but also all over the country. And so far, Tim, we've only done 6 or 7, and they've all been in Washington, D.C. And so we have got to, and we've been pleading with the chairman and others, we have got to be having field hearings, listening sessions. We've got to be listening to producers and really provide opportunity for input, because we got to make sure that the farm bill that's put forward works for the ag producers that are most impacted by it, and to make sure that it works for rural America. So 17 months away, starting those discussions, but a lot more to come and a lot of work left to do.
Absolutely, and certainly from our organization standpoint, look forward to working with you through that process. And as we've started a lot of the policy things behind the scenes and a lot of work from our side on looking at options and looking at costs, certainly a lot of concerns about where that budget is as we look at a budget baseline and some of the things we hear from our membership that are needs, and then look at the budget realities of how do we do that. And so I think agriculture as a whole has a lot of work to do to try to figure out some baseline dollars. Certainly, there's been a tremendous amount of non-baseline dollars spent on agriculture over the last couple of years, but those unfortunately don't really count in the way the government does accounting in preparation for a farm bill. So have to look at some creative ways of how we can come together with some dollars there. Certainly know that would make the Ag Committee's job a whole lot easier if there was some resources available there, as opposed to a status quo funding situation that then with a lot of changes in agriculture and with the impacts of inflation, frankly, a lot of the numbers that are there in the safety net just aren't much of a safety net today. So a huge job coming in terms of the next farm bill, but we certainly look forward to working with you throughout that process to make sure we do have that safety net that's so critical for our producers.
Well, I completely agree. And the heart of that, of course, is crop insurance. And, so when we look at this next farm bill, my number one priority is crop insurance. And to your point, I think we've got to acknowledge, unless things significantly change, that we're going into this next farm bill discussions, negotiations, hearings in a climate that has record high input costs for our producers. And also that has very high commodity prices right now. But we know that that's not going to necessarily hold. Producers are going to get squeezed potentially if we see a dip in prices here, because input costs likely won't go down correspondingly, at least in the short term. And so we've got to make sure that we have tools in place to protect that risk, because then you add in the risk, of course, from Mother Nature, and which makes crop insurance so vitally important and is a great public-private partnership, and I think is a huge success. To your point, we're going to need to have some candidates to have some very clear discussions on, is the safety net too low to the ground? Meaning, it's possible that with how high input costs are and how low some of the rates are in the farm bill, that you might hit land in the net, but you still might hit the ground. And so we need to really look at what those floors are and make sure that crop insurance is properly funded and is appropriate for the risk that ag producers are taking today.
Well, totally agree with that, and look forward to working with you through that process. As we wrap up this time today, final thoughts or comments that you'd just like to share?
Well, I would just say, another conversation that's certainly happening a lot of is climate. And I think we got to realize that the administration, most, not all, but a lot of policies, they're looking through the lens of climate, and a lot of discussion on what happens there. I think we need to make sure that whatever the government does potentially do so far as climate incentives and those sort of things, that one, the agriculture doesn't get left out, and two, that those dollars don't get pulled from crop insurance, other existing programs, and three, that there's an acknowledgement of the positive benefit of sorghum and of American agriculture to the environment. And we don't want to punish our early adopters for some of the practices that they have. So just the whole climate discussion, Tim, is something that I'm watching very, very closely. We're actively engaged in, and we want to make sure that agriculture ends up on the right side of that issue.
As you know, just an issue that our organization's spending a tremendous amount of time in, and one that we think sorghum has a tremendous story to tell on one side, and is a part of the solution, and on the other, as you mentioned, a very slippery slope when it comes to policy, and one thing that you have to be very careful of unintended consequences. So couldn't agree with you more, and look forward to the opportunity to work with you in that area as well as we move forward. So thank you very much for taking some time out on, I know what is a busy day for you, to visit with our listeners, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Likewise, thanks for all you're doing, Tim, and more to come, and let me know how I can be helpful. Thanks a lot.